Welcome to the December 8th, 2020 City of Broussard Council meeting. Please silence your cell phones, and if anyone from the audience would like to make a comment on an item listed on the agenda, please fill out a blue card located in the back of the room and turn it into our city clerk. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 5 minutes. Please stand for the pledge. Councilman Gary, would you lead us in the prayer?
Yes, sir. We, the members of the Broussard City Council, beg of thee, Almighty God, to enlighten our minds so that our work will be just and fair in all things. Give us the courage and strength to fulfill our duties according to the laws of the land, and fulfilling also thy holy will on earth and in heaven. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Item 2.1, acceptance of the minutes of the November 24th, 2020 meeting. Do we have a motion to accept?
I move to accept.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any public comment? Thank you, Councilwoman Rocca. Don, do we want to, for the record, I think we should state the two corrections. Would you agree? Amend the minutes. Can you announce what the corrections are, please? Or the absent councilman was Councilman Raven. Is there any public discussion? Any further council discussion? Do we have a call for the question?
District 1? Yes. District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 6?
Yay.
At large?
Yay.
Motion carries.
Item 3.1, Mr. Tracy Johnson, request for a variance for slab elevations for a shed at 506 West Main Street in District 1. Do we have a motion to approve? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I believe Mr. Johnson is here. Welcome. Sure. If you'd like to make a statement, we can do that at the podium, sir. Okay, thank you. I believe it's in District 1. Is that correct? Councilman Rocca, would you like to comment on the item?
Councilman Gary, Mr. Terry, and myself met with Mr. Johnson, and Ben was on the same page with us. Instead of it's 6 inches above floodplain instead of the foot that our ordinance requires. He is above the car shed, and we feel that we should grant the variance.
Okay, so the variance is for 6 inches on the slab.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, just so you realize, if the variance is granted to you, there will also be a hold harmless that you would sign with the city, just acknowledging that we've been through this process and the city has made you aware that that is the elevation that we recommend on a structure. Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Is there any further council discussion?
I'd like to make a comment. As a rule of thumb, nothing written on paper in the books or code books or anything, but just as a courtesy to neighbors, anytime anybody came with a variance, you know, Kenny, you've been here as long as I have, we always ask that landowner to get a variance, get a letter from the two landowners adjacent to them that it wouldn't affect them and they have no objections to it. But I don't think we need to press this issue on this matter because Ray's son lives next door, and it's so wide open right here, right next to the floodplain, that I don't think it's going to affect anybody. Just, as a matter of fact, gave a good example. If we make him build it up higher, he's just going to bring in more dirt and it just displace more water. So I think we can do away with that letter. But in the future, I just want to remind y'all that that was not written in the book's law, but it was just a courtesy that we stood by.
But to clarify, the house is out of the floodplain. The house is built up. This is just the shed. What are the dimensions on the shed? I mean, it's not a dwelling. I mean, it's an outbuilding, so I have no issue.
Let me clarify one thing. It's an accessory shed, and I just asked Ben. Our ordinance the federal regulation requires that you build at or above the base flood elevation. The city of Broussard passed a local ordinance saying go a foot above that. He's 6 inches above it. So what he's doing conforms to the federal regulation. It just doesn't conform to our ordinance. I think I would have a little bit more problem if he was below the BFE, but he's 6 inches above it. So it's not a big ask, especially for an accessory shed. I think a home would maybe be something a little bit different. Yeah, big piece of property.
Call for the question.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4,
Yes.
District 5,
Yes.
District 6,
Yay.
at large,
Yay.
District 1, yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being here tonight. Item 3.2, Mr. Burton Colder, June 30th, 2020 Financial Audit Report presentation. Welcome, Brad, and welcome, Burton.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. We're here to talk tonight about the audit for last year, and that's the year ending June 30th of 2020. We have some good results. It was a difficult year. I don't have to tell y'all, especially half the year with the COVID beginning in I think it was around February or March. So first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to mention that we had 3 verbal comments. Verbal comments mean they're not serious items that need to be put in the report, but there's something that we wanted to mention to management when we had the exit conference with the mayor and with Karen and with Tina. We talked about these things, and some of which have already been corrected. Again, they're not severe, so we didn't even put them in the report. We had 1 finding in your report last year. At present, we have no findings in this report. That finding was corrected. It pertained to the sports facility, but it has since been resolved. So I'm happy to say we have no findings that are included in this report, which has been sent to Baton Rouge and is going to become a public record once they release it. So, and that being said, I wanted to go ahead and turn it over to Brad, and he's going to go over the utility operations, and then we'll conclude with the rest of the city.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. If we could, let's go into the audit report on page 68. And page 68 is the utility fund. We'll take a look at each department and then look at the totals after we look at each department. So what I'm going to try and do is work from right with the garbage, and then we'll finish with the totals on the left side of the page. I'm not going to hit each item for the sake of time, but if you do have a question, please just go ahead and stop me. We can discuss it at that time. Starting with the garbage, you can see that revenues did increase from 2019 to 2020 from $1,144,000 to almost $1,003,000. So that's approximately $152,000. So a nice increase in the revenues. There's not many expenses to speak of in the garbage department, but in total, last year you spent $1,094,000. The number increased to $1,138,000. So not that much of an increase, and you can see the effect it had on the bottom line. You had an operating profit last year of $50,000, and that increased by a little over $108,000 to $158,000 in the current year. So a nice healthy increase in the garbage department revenues and also in the bottom line. Moving on to the sewer department, a little bit of a different situation here. Revenues did increase from $796,000 to $836,000, so about $40,000 increase on the revenue side. All of the expenses are listed here before you. In total, in 2019, $2,067,000 of expense. That number increased by a little over $200,000 to $2,275,000. But one thing I'd like to point out, it's toward the middle of the page, engineering fees. You can see that's $116,000 in the current year. That number last year was $60,000. Approximately $88,000 in old projects was expensed by the administration in this year. They were projects basically where they were abandoned. And so we went ahead and expensed them. So I wanted to point that out because it's not as though you spent this much on engineering in the current year. These were old expenses that so you know what, we're not going to continue with these projects. We're going to expense them now. Any questions about that?
Specifically, I just want to point out one of those projects was a improvement to the Cote Gully lift station off of Alvis's Parkway. We've determined over the last year or so, I guess, that that project is not a relevant site for a regional lift station. That was being looked at a few years ago. There is a large lift station near the senior center on Alvis's Parkway that is a better candidate for that. So, but it is not our most important lift station improvement. Eola Street is the one that we are targeting for our next big improvement. It carries, it would improve the downtown area of Broussard the most. But in having Mel, Como Engineering, Shane, your whole team evaluate the city as we have done over the last 2 years to figure out a global plan for growing our sewer infrastructure, that's the determination that was made, that we have some different needs, and we didn't need to sink a lot of money into that particular lift station when we have one that we think would be quite a bit cheaper to make it perform at a higher level when we so determine that improvement is needed. Mel, if you want to add to that at all, please do.
No, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. So just to kind of reinforce what you were saying, that was one of the projects that was on the books in the past that came off, and it's sort of being redirected for our future.
And so when you take that into consideration, this $88,000 that we expensed this year, yeah, the expenses were up $208 roughly, but when you back out the 88, it's closer to maybe the 120 or 130 mark. So I wanted to point that out. But revenues, expenses still are up in the sewer department. And you look at the bottom line, we lost $1,270,000 last year. That loss increased to $1,439,000 in the current year. Again, taking into consideration this extra expense that we added this year. It is worth pointing out the biggest expense on the page here for sewer is depreciation. It's, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 from the bottom, about $906,000. So when you add that back to the operating loss of $1,000,004, you're cash negative, roughly $500,000, round number, give or take. And we'll talk a little bit more about that more in a minute. Moving on to water, revenues were up as we saw with the sewer department, $1,775,000 up to $1,835,000, so give or take $60,000 increase in the revenues. And expenses were really flat. In fact, they were down a little bit. You spent $2,384,000 last year. That number decreased by about $5,000 to $2,379,000. So good to see the increase in the revenue, basically holding, even slightly decreasing those expenditures. And you can see the effect it has on the bottom line. You lost from operations a little over $608,000 last year, and that loss decreased to a loss of $544,000. But as I did with sewer, let's look at depreciation. That's $400,000 for the water department. So when you add back $400,000 of depreciation to that $544 operations loss, you're losing roughly $144,000, $145,000 of cash in the water department. And then bringing everything together in total, how do we do when we add everything up together? Revenues were up from $3,717,000 in 2019 to $3,969,000 in 2020, so a little over a $250,000 increase in total revenues. Total operating expenditures, you can see, basically are up by that exact same amount. $5.5 million or $5,545,000 in 2019, $5,794,000. That is again roughly $250,000. And you can see the bottom line, a loss of $1,828,000 last year, a loss of $1,825,000 in the current year. So almost identical operating losses in both 19 and 20. As I did with water and sewer, when you add back, you're looking at about $1.3 million in depreciation. You're cash negative both in 19 and 20 by roughly $500,000. Okay, and we talked about this at every meeting since I've been coming, and we did talk about this a good deal with it in the exit conference with Tina, with the mayor, and with Karen. And Karen provided me with a projection, because you guys go up on the rates every July 1 and January 1. And so she said you wanted to break out when would you be operations positive and when would you be cash positive for both water and sewer. And what she provided is in 2024, at the current rate that you guys are increasing both water and sewer rates, you'd be operations positive in 2024 in water and cash positive in 2021. So water, with I think it's a 5% we do on January and July 1, you're getting closer from at least a cash perspective to being break even. From an operations point, 24, she's only projecting 7,000 positive, probably looking at more like a 25 number there. That's assuming expenses stay relatively static. Sewer, however, is a little bit of a different story. Even she projected all the way out to 2026, and in 2026, she projected loss from operations of 310,000. So even with the increases you guys are doing, you're even in 2026 going to be operations negative. She did project in 2023, you'd be slightly cash positive in sewer at about $37,000. So wanted to point that out because some of our other municipalities have adjusted their rates more aggressively because of some of these losses that they've had, quite frankly, not as severe as what you're suffering in sewer. Wanted to point that out. The administration did some legwork on it, wanted to bring this out and let you guys know, something you may want to consider, probably a fairly tough thing to consider during COVID. Nevertheless, we're here once a year to present the audit. I thought it was a good time to present it, and maybe at the budget or something like that, you guys could consider. I would say sewer is more of a need than water. Water is a closer time frame to being cash positive and even operations positive. But even like I said, out to 26, sewer is still a problem area.
So Brad, you are correct in what you're saying. From several years back, I don't exactly remember when it was started, but working with your office and with Burton, the council at that time had sort of put a plan together to have smaller increases, but that would gain ground to try to get to operation zero, basically, without putting too much strain on the citizens of Broussard. There was always a position of let's not be too burdensome on our residents in the city. The system is working. The projections you just talked about show that. If the council is comfortable with the timeline, then they don't need to do anything because that was adopted at our budget meeting in June. But that is there to be evaluated, and the council can make a decision on that to change that anytime they wish. I believe, Karen, do you have handouts? Did the entire council get the handout? Which just showed your projection. So it's just something that we want to make sure everybody is left with. But I guess just to reiterate the point that the city is on pace to get those losses in sewer and water covered. That's been going on for at least 4 or 5 years. And there is a time when we'll reach an even point. Today, I think, is a comfortable timeline, but that always can be reconsidered by the council.
I think the one thing I just want to point out, Mayor, is that from an operations standpoint, if everybody looks at sewer, the operating income or loss, even when she projects out to 2026, looking at sewer, 3 from the bottom, even in 2026, it's an operations loss of $310,000 in sewer. She projects cash positive, bottom line, in 2023. So I want to clarify that, because water is quite a bit different story than sewer is. But even in her projection, we don't get to any break-even point from operations on sewer even in 2026. It's still a loss of $310,000.
But in that statement, you're talking about depreciation being part of the equation, correct?
Yes, sir.
So
Correct.
without depreciation being part of the equation in 2023,
Correct, yes.
the city becomes cash
Yes, sir.
positive. in sewer.
Correct. Just wanted to point it out because we spent some time on it in the exit. If y'all have any questions about this, Karen prepared it, but it is good numbers. I do not know off the top of my head.
With the water well online and then the depreciation went down.
Except- And I think the useful life we're using is what, 40 years. So you talk about a 40-year, dividing that asset by 40 years and then taking a few months of it, so it's not gonna be, yeah, you'll see a full year of it.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Any other questions about anything, whether it's Karen's projection or anything I covered on page 68? If there's none, the second page of your handout is the per customer per month. We always go over this every meeting. It gives you a little bit different look at the numbers that we're looking at in utility fund. Instead of just looking at these large numbers, this is a little bit smaller scale. You can see on the handout in water in the top left-hand corner, we have the 4-year history of your number of customers. You can see steady increase in the customers in the water department. And you can see in the service income, this is what you guys are charging for water. In 17, it was at $20 and change, and then it's crept up each year. And we're up to $24 and change in the current year. We have some connection penalties and things that we add. And total income is ranging between about $26.50 and $28 for the water department. The good news about water is that the operating expenses have been trending downward. So that's a good thing. And then the operating income, you can see the loss has gotten smaller each of the 4 years in front of you. We then add back depreciation. And from a cash perspective, all the way in 17, you were losing over $7 per customer. And here in the current year, you're losing $2.20, which kind of makes sense when you take a look at Karen's projection that in 21, she expects y'all to be cash neutral, maybe even cash positive. And that seems to make sense with the trend you guys are showing in water. Taking a look at sewer.
Interrupt for just a minute. I just want to point out some comparisons to Youngsville. We just finished the audit in Youngsville. We did the same similar thing. That rate on water is $45.50. Y'all's is $28.10. Okay, I'm not adhering that you go up to that rate, but just to give you a comparison, the city of Scott is at $40.37 for water. The city of Carencro is at $40.48 for water. So all of these are in the 40 to Youngsville's higher than 45. Now they did jump it up. They were at 36, they jumped it up to 45, and it was average this past year. But just to give you a frame of mind, how you comparing with your local neighbors right here in this parish, you are low on that side. So just wanted to point that out. I do have the sewer numbers with
Moving on to sewer, which is on the right-hand side of the page at the top, you can see the steady increase in the customers each year, which is great. And again, the service income is creeping up each year. We're at $12 and change in 17. We're up to $14, almost $15 in 2020. The thing I don't like as much is that when you look at the operating expenses, those are creeping up at around the same rate as the income is. So we're at $41.50 in 2017. We're at $44.50 in the current year. And again, there's a little bit more expense in the current year in sewer as we talked about with engineering. But again, it's not making a massive difference on this number. And you can see the operating losses in sewer have actually been kind of increasing. We're up to the highest one we have on the page here at $28.15 in the current year. We're back in 17, it was 25 and change. We then add back depreciation, and you lost $10.42 per customer per month in the current year. And in the prior years, it ranged between $8.80 and about $7.50. So this is, in sewer, unfortunately, the worst year you've had of the 4 years we had in front of you. So that's the number.
To give you a frame of mind on sewer, as Brad indicated, like this year, y'all average $16.37 in total with the sewer, with the connection fee. City of Youngsville is at $36.38. The city of Scott on sewer is at $27.45. But their costs are only $24.50. Your costs are higher, but we all know you've got probably the best system. From what I know, and I'm not an engineer, obviously, but from what I know in talking to some of these other cities, and I've even seen your plant a few years ago, you've got the Cadillac of the plants, and you can also expand, and so on. Now, the city of Carencro in sewer, they were at $41.68. So most of these other cities are in the $30 to $40 range, for the charges on the sewer, and yet we're here at $16.37. I think wanted to point out, I know what we're doing, what you're doing is definitely commendable, that you're trying to increase those rates gradually. But at budget time, as Brad indicated, it may be something that this administration and this council might want to consider, just a boost on it a little bit, continue with your current plan, but just a boost on the increase in the rate as a one-time type of thing. Get you somewhat caught up. And that will help in getting you to a break-even standpoint a little bit sooner than what was projected by him. Just food for thought.
Now, the good news on garbage is you have increasing customers, your income is increasing. We don't have to worry about adding back depreciation. If you go to the very bottom line for garbage, it's producing cash for you guys every year. $2.85 this year, almost $1 last year, and almost $1.50 the year before that. So garbage is operating exactly how you want it to be. You want to cover your costs and make a little bit of profit on it, so to speak, and you guys are doing that. And in the bottom right is bringing together all the departments looking at as a whole. So that $61.90, that's the average bill a citizen of Broussard would receive, averaging businesses and residential, obviously, $61.90. Last year was $57.45. Then we add back the connections, penalties, and everything, brings it up to almost $68. It was $65 the past 2 years. You can see, looking at the operating expenses are very consistent for the 4 years in front of you, running right at about $100 all 4 years, and you're losing between $33 and $38 per customer per month in operations. We add back the depreciation, and you lost $9.77 this year. That's very comparable with last year when it was $9.84, and the year before that was $10.96. But it should be pointed out, substantial improvement as the utility fund as a whole from 17 when you lost $15.61. So you've cut down from the $15.61 in 17 down to $9.77. So that should be commended. You talk about a $5 or $6 decrease over this 4-year period. A lot of numbers there, going over the departments. Any questions about the utility fund at all? Anything I went over at all? If there's no questions, why don't we flip to, I believe it's page 70 in the audit report? It is. And page 70 is the sports complex. Now, the sports complex was obviously affected when you look at the revenues. $635,000 last year, decreased to $495,000 because of COVID. I mean, you couldn't have as many things go on. The restrictions, everybody knows about it. In fact, I'm pleased to see that the decrease in revenue wasn't more than what it was. Now, unfortunately, is that when you have something like the park, the expenses are pretty much fixed. I mean, you're not going to have a big decrease in the expenditures just because there's not as much going on, and you can see that. They're all listed out in front of you here, the expenditures, but in total, $2,411,000 was spent in 2019, an increase to $2,532,000 in 2020, so about a $120,000 increase. Various items moved up and down, causing the increase. I do want to point out, as I did with the utility fund, we do have depreciation. It's the second from the bottom expense of $943,000. It was $939,000 last year. Because when you look at the loss from operations, $1,776,000 last year, up to $2 million. When you add back that depreciation, you're looking at an operation. You know, from a cash perspective, you're losing $1.1 million, $1.2 million. Okay, so not something you're happy about, but at the same time, you didn't do the park expecting to make money either. And you have to look at the whole picture. When you keep on moving down, you get to the non-operating revenues or expenditures in this case, and the big one is the interest, and that's the interest on the bonds, obviously, running you a little over $1 million in both 19 and 20. And then after we add that in, you have a loss of $2.8 million in 2019 and a little over $3 million in 2020. But it should be pointed out, it's not really in front of you here, that your half-cent sales tax is generating roughly $2.7 million. So when you factor in the depreciation of about $900,000 on the page, the sales tax of 2.7, the payments on the interest and the bond principal, you're probably cash negative here. Rough estimate, I would say between $400,000 and $600,000. So once the debt's paid off or gets smaller, then we'll be in a better situation. But for right now, you're going to lose between $400,000 and $500,000 roughly, assuming similar operations in the sports complex. But if revenues would go up and expenses hold, that would obviously get better. Any questions about the sports complex or anything I said or maybe didn't cover on page 70? Because I didn't go over the expenditures in detail.
One thing about the sports complex, and we addressed it last week, which is Youngsville, they have a similar situation. It's hard to measure how much is generated to the city in the form of revenue, people spending money when they come here. No doubt that has an impact. That has helped with the sales tax situation, I think here as well as over there. They are losing money as well, but I think, like Brad pointed out, probably most of these, you will not make money on the park itself, but it's what it attracts into the community. And so I think you're gonna see some positive impact of this, more so with the sales tax generation, of course, people spending money. So, you're not out of line with that. I mean, we're seeing it there, we're seeing it in Karen Grove, to a lesser extent in Karen Grove because they have a much smaller park. But we're seeing the same thing there when we can have one as well. Questions on that?
And, between last year and this year, there's a decrease in revenue. I mean, the number is not terrible, but COVID and the lack of being able to hold as many tournaments and so on absolutely had an effect on the amount of traffic we could run through the park.
And we saw the same thing with the city of Youngsville. Their revenues were down pretty much close to where yours were, and they've been in operation a little bit longer than we have. So when it's all said and done, it's not a bad situation considering what we've gone through with this book. With the park at the time. Any additional comments or questions?
Thank you. I'm gonna turn it back over to my dad and he'll cover the operation of the city.
Okay, on the first page of the handout that you have, which is loosely given to you, I'm not gonna focus on any page at this point, but this one-page document, it encompasses all of the funds of the city of Broussard. The sports complex, the utility fund, the general fund, the sales tax funds, and any debt service fund. So it's everything included on this one page. It's all coming from the audit, came from your final amended budget, which is also included in here. So we try and bring it together so we can talk about it in one page instead of flipping through 5 or 6 or 7 pages in this report. It makes it quite cumbersome and quite difficult to follow. So we've done this in the past. I think it's worked okay, but certainly interrupt me and ask questions and we'll certainly try and address those. On the tax revenues, now this is your sales tax, the well, you don't have any property taxes here, but it does include the franchise taxes and so on. And you budgeted $15,600,000. That's the final amended budget. We actually ended up at $15,225,000, $300,000 below budget. Let me mention something here too, that what we did, and I think you all are aware of it, the sales tax office, Lafayette Parish School Board, has informed the city that there's some possibilities that you may have to get a credit, or we may have to give a credit because there were some taxes that were collected on an area that was paid to the city of Broussard, but this particular business should have been in Lafayette. And Ray's had numerous discussions. I've had a few discussions with them, and they are in the process of looking at this with this vendor, going through the information. And we estimated, or they estimated, I should say, that the impact would have been on a 3-year basis, if you'd have to go back for the most recent 3 years, about $840,000. So let me say this, when we did the audit, we knew about it, okay? So the cautious thing to do is that to go ahead and record that as an amount owed to the school board, as a remittance back to the school board. Now what they're gonna do is they're gonna deduct it on future payments. But we had encountered that a few years ago, and we had to book that as well. So it's a similar situation. So my point to you is that $15.2 million is after we've deducted the $840,000 that is estimated that this city will have to take a credit every month for probably 3 years or 4 years, whatever y'all decide on, or if that's what they come up with. So we took the conservative approach. And that's why it's showing that it's less than what you had budgeted. Had we not had to do this, and we didn't know about it at the time, then when the budget, or you didn't know about it when the budget was prepared, had we not had to do this, you'd have been above budget, which is commendable with this situation that we've had. So I wanted to point that out because it does impact quite a few things. But you can see last year we collected $15,700,000. So when I add back the $840,000 to this year, we'd have been over $16 million. So you still did very well considering the situation and even after we've adjusted it by the 840. Licenses and permits, you budgeted $1.5 million, you actually received $1,653,000, about 100,000 more than what was anticipated. Last year, the number was $1,718,000. The biggest reason for the decrease is in the permit areas, and that just depends on how much construction is going on and how much we have to charge for certain permits that are issued. Your insurance occupational license, which is included in here, and your regular occupational licenses are right on target. They're very consistent with last year's, and in some cases are a little bit higher than last year. Intergovernmental revenues, revenues coming from either the feds, the state, or LCG, 504,000, and for the budget, it is 545,000 on the actual, with 40,000 above budget. Last year was $1,033,000, where we had some grant revenues last year. Utility fund charges, Brad just went over that. Total was $3,915,000 on the budget. We brought in more than that at $3,969,000, 54,000 more than what was anticipated, and last year the number was $3,717,000. Sports complex, we just talked about that. You had budgeted $500,000 or $507,000, came in at $495,000, only $12,000 below what was anticipated, and last year was $635,000. The fines and forfeits, budgeted $429,000, came in at $460,000, and that's $32,000 more than we thought. Last year was $200,000. Interest, $82,000 on the budget, $83,000, and it came in at $81,000. We're about $2,000 below budget. Last year was $80,000. Miscellaneous, which is sort of a catch-all, $236,000 was on the budget, came in at $251,000. That's $15,000 more than we thought, and last year was only $101,000. So total revenues budgeted for the city of Broussard, $22,831,000. We actually brought in $22,681,000. That's $150,000 below budget. And that's very close. If you look at the bottom of the page, the revenue variance from budget is only 0.66% under budget. And remember, this is after we recorded $840,000. We reduced your revenues. We booked it as a possible liability to the Lafayette Parish School Board. Okay? Everybody clear on that? So had we not done that, had we not had to do this, then you would have been over budget. Your budget you'd have been over the amount that was anticipated by approximately $600,000 to $650,000. Very good situation. So you did a good job on the budget. You should be commended for that as far as the revenues go. And expenditures are going to be the similar type of situation. On administration, you can see very close to budget, $91,000 off of budget on $2.4 million, and last year you spent $2,409,000. Economic development, $364,900 on the budget, came in at $364,800. We're $100 off of budget, and last year was $220,000. Under public safety for the police department, budgeted $3,215,000, spent $3,240,600 over budget. This is only for the operations of the police department. It is not including any kind of capital that may have been spent. None of these numbers include capital. Last year was $2.8 million. Fire department budgeted $2,663,000, actually spent $2,616,000, and that's about $46,000 less than was anticipated. Last year the number was $1,093,000. This year you appropriated some monies for the purchase of, I think, 1 or 2 fire trucks as well as some air packs. And that was a lease purchase, but it had to be recorded on the city and as an appropriation to the fire department. So that's what's in there. It's about $1.4 million more than what you normally would have. And it's included, it is a capital item, and it is included as an appropriation to the fire department. The streets and drainage budgeted $3,102,000. You're within $50 of that. You spent $3,102,567, within $50 of the budget, $50 below budget. Last year, $2,997,000 was spent, and the year before that, almost $3 million as well. Now, the next category is in the Parks and Rec, and this is just some recreation or parks type item. $10,378 was on the budget. You spent $10,145. Utility fund expenses, Brad talked about that earlier. You budgeted to spend $5,529,000. We actually spent $5,794,000, $264,000 more than we thought. I think he alluded to it earlier. You had some projects that had been set up as construction in progress. In this year, in this current fiscal year, these items were no longer basically abandoned type of project, but you had spent those monies, so we had to expense them in the year that it were abandoned. And I think there was around $100,000 of that was in there. The sports complex expenses, $2,495,000, and you budgeted, and the actual was $2,532,000, $37,000 more than we thought. Last year was $2,411,000. Principal retirement on the bonds and then the interest, very close, right on target with budget. Principal retirement's at $1,389,000, and the interest was at $647,000. So roughly about $2 million of debt service. Capital outlay, various items, you budgeted to spend $4,565,000. We spent $55,000 less than that at $4,509,000. Excuse me. In total, though, for the expenditures for the city of Broussard, you had anticipated spending $26,299,000. You spent $26,613,000, $300,000 more than what was anticipated. The majority of this is in the utility fund expenses. And as I alluded to, we had some projects that were abandoned that's included in that number that were not anticipated, I guess, at the budget time. But be that as it may, you can see the very last line item says expenditure variance from budget. You're 1.2% above budget. Remember, you've got to be within 5. So you're well within your guidelines and what state statutes require. So good shape there as well. Okay, the excess or deficiency of revenues over expenditures, you had anticipated it being $3,468,000. It actually ended up at $3,932,000. So it's $400,000 more than what we thought. However, if we'd had back that $840,000 I talked about, you'd have been $400,000 the other way. I want to point that out. That was not anticipated in the budget, but we had to record it when we did the actual audit. Then, of course, you have other revenues and expenses, mainly the interest on the utility bonds. That's $1,061,000, and also the bonds on the sports complex. The excess bottom line, you had anticipated having a deficit in this line item. So you anticipated it of $3,018,000. It actually came in at $3,481,000. That's $400,000 more than what was anticipated. Again, after we recorded the $840,000 for the sales tax. I keep referring to it because it's a significant item. And other than that, it would have flipped. If you wouldn't have had it, it would have flipped your budget the other way. You'd have been $400,000 to the good. Any questions on this? This is the overall operations for the city, and you can see you're very steady with the revenues and pretty consistent with the expenditures, with the exception of the capital being a little higher this year than normal on the capital outlay. But overall, not a bad situation, and we'll look at how the city stands as of June. This is for the year ending June of 2020. We're going to look now at a snapshot, unless you have some questions that we want to try and look at here. If I don't have any questions, let's go to page 52 of the blue book. Page 52. Page 52 is the statement of net position. This is, in other words, a balance sheet of the city of Broussard. The assets that you own, the liabilities that you owe, being bonded debt and all debt, and it includes all the assets, not just the utility assets, this building we're sitting in, and all the infrastructure over the years. So let's go through this, and I'm going to focus on the third column, because the third column is the totals for the city. It includes all of the governmental activities, and it includes the utility fund as well as the sports complex, which is considered to be business type activities. So looking at the total column, total cash for the city was at $14,813,000 as of June 2020. Last year it was at $16,909,000. Well, we just looked at it. We had a deficit for the year, which we knew. So consequently, it would show up as a reduction in cash. We had to spend those monies in order we had to use some of our monies that we had in surplus in order to create this deficit. That's not unusual for a city. It's about $2 million that we're down. Now, on the receivables, very close, $3,350,000 last year, $3,332,000 for the current year. The internal balances, of course, balance off between the funds, and then due from other governments was $24,000 this year. It was $329,000 last year. Prepaid items, $272,000 this year versus $265,900 last year. So total current assets of the city went down about $2.4 million, from $20,855,000 to $18,400,000. Now, the non-current assets, which is your cash and restricted assets, interest-bearing deposits, these are restricted. $3.6 million last year, $3.7 million this year. Your capital assets, which is your land and your construction in progress, was at $13.8 million last year. It's $13.7 million. And then the capital assets were $79 million as a book value, $79.6 last year. This year they're up to $81,432,000. Obviously, we spent probably $3 to $4 million on capital assets, and our depreciation, I think Brad pointed out, was around $1 million. Hence, your net book value would go up because of that. So total assets of the city, very close. Look at this, $117,941,000 last year. Total this year is $117,302,000. This deferred outflow of resources, this is pertaining mainly to the pensions. You do have a little bit for the bond refunding as well. This is like a prepaid item that we're required to show. The pension plan is a state pension plan, but they gave us the information for us to present on the city's report for its share of those pensions. We're going to look at that in just a minute. But total current liabilities of the city, and you see that's accounts payable and various items. You see that due to other governments, that number of $1,527,000, last year was $1,195,000. That is the amount owed to the Lafayette Parish School Board from the previous years that we're still paying. And really, I say we're still paying. They're reducing your sales tax revenues by those amounts on a monthly basis. Well, you paid it this year, but then we had to add that $840. And again, it's an estimate, but it's hopefully a pretty close estimate, and hopefully it'll be too high, and maybe we can reduce it next year. So that's why that number went up, but that's why that $840,000 is, in case you were wondering. And then we have the bonds payable for the current portion, but total liabilities, current liabilities were $4,281,000 last year. They're $5,016,000 for the current year. Then you have your non-current, which is mainly your bonds, and non-current liabilities were $45 million last year. They're $45 million this year. Total debts of the city of Broussard, $49,669,000. This is everything. And this year is $50,028,000. The important information that I want to make points on is what's down at the bottom, what we call net position. If we took all of our assets minus all of our debts, what do we have left? That's what the citizens own, or their equity in this city. And you can see it's made up of investment and capital assets. The total number, however, is about $68 million both years. But we've reinvested, or you've reinvested, about $57 million in capital assets. Obviously, that's been spoken for. It's not available to you. But what is available to you is $8.2 million in sales tax dedications, and it was $7,331,000 last year. And then you have the unrestricted deficit, which was $3.2 million versus $39,000. So those two numbers are available to you. And I want to use those numbers and show you how many days of operation does the city have available. We always talk about this, or how many months of operation. Well, if I take the total expenditures you had on that other page we just looked at, that separate handout was about $23 million. Back it out to capital outlay. How much are we spending to operate this city on a daily basis? And that includes depreciation, so it's included in the operations. We're spending about $59,000 a day, okay? If I take that and I divide that into the $8,200,000 and some odd thousand, which is $8,227,000 plus the $39,000, it gives you about 139 days that you have available as a cushion. Do you have it in cash? Absolutely. We just talked about it. You have about $15 million in cash. But what we're saying that's available basically on an unrestricted position, you have about 4.6 months of available to operate this city, assuming no revenues come in. That's your cushion, which is important to know. And we've talked about this with other of our other clients. It's a very important factor to realize, especially during this COVID situation. If we get shut down again, I mean, your revenues somewhat cease, not entirely, but somewhat cease. How much cushion do we have to operate? And it's a good barometer. So we had 139 days, that's 4.6 months. You should be at least 2 months. You should be 60 days. You're in excess of 2.5, you're basically twice the number, over twice the number that you need to be. Now, obviously, the higher the better, okay? So you're still healthy there. Your general fund is another barometer we look at. General fund, you have 7 months of available reserves in the general fund to operate based on the general fund operations, which is, again, very good. Most of our cities have around the 60 days or sometimes less, some of them in the 90-day range. So you are healthy there on the general fund. The city has always been healthy from a general fund standpoint. So those numbers are not presented, but I wanted to mention that. Any questions? We've gone through a lot, and but again, I think the city's in healthy financial shape. You have a good handle on what you're doing, and also on your budget, and you're following your budget pretty closely, as I indicated. Any questions on that? One final thing, and it's the third page of your handout that I wanted to point out, and we get back to the operations of the city, but how did we operate from an operational standpoint? When I take out capital outlay and I take out grants, okay? And here we have 4 years. You have 17, 18, 19, and 20. And the important thing is to see what we're doing. We're taking your net excess of deficiency. If you look at 2020, you remember your deficiency was 3.4 million, but that's after capital. Everybody sees that first line item under 2020. And then I'm adding back, or I'm taking out the grants. For example, the debt issuance. We issued $1.4 million in lease money, basically to buy the fire equipment. Well, I'm deducting that. That's just $1.496 million. But I'm adding back the capital that we spent, which is a total of $5,927,000. So where did we end for 2020? We ended up at $948,000 from an operational standpoint. But remember, this is after we recorded $840,000 of an estimate that will have to be repaid possibly to the Lafayette Parish School Board. So that gives you, basically, assuming an even situation with the prior years, you were probably somewhere around 1.8 million as your surplus from an operational standpoint. How does it compare to the prior years? Last year we were at 2.2 million. Year before that was 2.7 million, and year before that was 2,671,000. So it is less this year, but you've had a lot of factors that were taken into consideration. But operational wise, it is still positive, and I'm happy to report that. You hate to see it, but some years you could have an operational deficit. That's definitely a possibility, but you have not had that here, luckily, and hopefully we don't anticipate that for the future. Any questions there? So operational wise, you still were in the black, and even more so if I'd add back that sales tax item that I talked about. So any questions? Yes, sir. We had a conference, I'm sure Ray might have mentioned it, we had a conference call. It was in fact, it was a video conference. It was a Zoom meeting with them. I think it was y'all were in this chamber. I was at my office, and we talked to them about it. And initially, I'll just say they were looking at going, what, Ray, 7 or 8 years, I think.
11 years.
11 years.
I believe was the first look.
See, they went back to when they first looked at this, when they had these problems in the past, when y'all got charged, Youngsville got charged, Carencro got charged, and it was like most of the smaller municipalities, they had people that were reporting to them and paying sales tax that should have been reported, I guess, to the city of Lafayette or to the parish, whatever. And so they wanted to go back to that rate. And we said, whoa, wait a minute, the statute's not that. And that's when we ended up, it's normally a 3-year statute on it. So hopefully, once they do the audit, I mean, you're subject to looking at it, definitely do that. And we'll see where we end up. But hopefully it'll be less than the 840. I think they do some, I know they do some auditing. We audit the school board, but we don't we look at the sales tax collections because they're just an agency fund. They collect and remit back to the governments. But they do their own internal audits and investigations, and they look at this stuff. And they do have some contract auditors that go out there. So they look at the boundaries, and I think it's just been some flaws in the boundaries, to be honest with you. And they're slowly getting to some of those. They had a big flurry of it, and I mean, we do all the other cities in the parish. You're the only ones this current year that got this possibility of this error. So hopefully most of it is behind us. But
we had issues at one time with Baker, if you remember.
right,
And then Halliburton overpaid, I think. They
Right.
both went to new different accounting systems, and then they overpaid us.
right.
This money is above and beyond that, but we're still paying on those two
We're
items.
still paying on those two items, Kenny, and we're paying down to one. Yeah,
Halliburton or Baker? Baker was a big lick, man. That was a,
oh yeah. Well, good. And it's pretty significant, Karen. You have 6 months as we speak. So by June 30th, so if I take that $1.5 million that we're showing as a liability minus the 840, we had about 700,000. So you're getting hit, let's say 55, 60,000 a month right now, but it'll be done in 6 months from today.
this is 850 come from one business?
As I understand it, it's only one.
Yes. And, you know, I just want to put on a record that this is not a mistake that was made by the city of Broussard.
Not at all.
The business self-reports their taxable income to the school board. The school board then sends each municipality what their taxable income is. So as years tick by, then all of a sudden someone catches at the school board or at the business, we've been paying the wrong entity, we've been collecting the wrong amount of taxes, then the municipality is holding a problem. And that's why we had this meeting with the school board representatives, because this has happened to us 3 times. It's been significant. This 3rd time, we really wanted to dig in and find out what's going on. How can this keep happening to us? You allow a municipality to be able to set up a budget, operate for years, and then, oh, well, there was a mistake, and some of the money that we said was yours is not yours. So the initial look from this particular instance was $1.7 million. That was the first phone call we got. After the meeting, we asked for an audit to make sure the number would be extremely accurate before we agreed that we're just gonna agree to it. And we got in a position of $840 so far. After the audit, we'll really know where we are, and we're gonna live up to our responsibility, whatever that is. But Burton felt it was necessary, even though we don't have that number confirmed yet, to put it in our audit. And this audit, Burton, you might have said it in the beginning, but I'll say it again. The fiscal year that ended in June of 2020 is what we're referring to.
Correct.
Our new budget is, you know, we're in the 2021 budget cycle now, but you're reporting on our previous budget, and that's where you are applying the total of the $840,000 into that year.
Correct.
So it's booked there. You see how it affects our numbers, but we have not begun to pay it back yet, and we won't need to do that till we get the results of the audit, and then it'll be brought forward to the council to be explained by our school board.
And one good thing that, just to piggyback, I guess, on what the mayor's saying, I'd ask Karen, how is the city doing this year? And I don't know if she's reported this to y'all, or maybe she hasn't all of it yet, but how is the sales tax for the city of Broussard doing relative to our budget that you have in place now? And I'm happy to say, and looking at the numbers, we're 21% above budget, which is phenomenal.
For the income coming into the
Current
city.
fiscal year that we're in right now, which will end June 30th of next year. But for the 4 months, you're 21% above budget.
So
that's fantastic.
In June, when the budget was being created, the council very wisely, through Karen and your advice, chose to cut the budget by 50%. We were in COVID was going on, etc., and the downturn in the economy. The news you're reporting tonight is great news that our income has been 21% of that reduced budget. And that was done, that 15% reduction was done without cutting any service to any resident or any business of the city of Broussard. So it's great news that revenues have been consistent. It's still time to be cautious, but revenues have been consistent.
but we're 21% above budget, and as Ray indicated, the budget was cut by 15. So even if you added back that 15 that was cut, that, again, that's just an estimate, we're still 6% above that number, right? And we're above last year. And last year was a good year considering all the effects. And this is fantastic, in my opinion, considering all of the things that we're going through, everyone's going through with this COVID situation. So that's good. That's great news. And you're right. I think y'all restricted doing certain things as far as compensation went into the budget because of this. We didn't know what was going to happen. But this is great. So any additional questions or comments on this? We'd like to thank you all for allowing us to work with everyone again this year. It's always a pleasure to work with the staff and the council and the mayor here at the city of Broussard, and we want to thank you for your business and wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bert and Brad.
Perhaps we could entertain a motion to approve the financial audit report presented on folder.
Thank you, Don. Do we have a motion to approve the report that we just heard? Is there any public comment? Is there any further council discussion?
Question.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4, District 5,
Yes.
District 6,
Yay.
at large. District 1, yes. District 2,
Yes.
motion carries.
Item 4.1, ordinance number 20-669, an ordinance amending section 6-20, section 6-21, section 6-23, and section 24 of chapter 6 alcoholic beverage of Code of Ordinances of the city of Broussard. Do we have a motion to adopt?
Motion.
Second.
This is the second vote on adoption. It was presented at the last meeting. Don, would you like to comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It was previously introduced, discussed at the previous meeting, and I believe we checked with the police department. All comments were good. I haven't heard a thing since that last meeting. Tina tells me that the notice was published in the advertisement, so it is ready tonight for adoption. I think it was said at the last meeting, it kind of evens up the playing field for Broussard businesses and so forth. So I think it's a good ordinance, and the police department is fine with it. So I think all is in order to be adopted, unless anybody has a question.
Thank you, Don. Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
No,
Okay.
this is falling in line with the rest of the parish mostly.
Will now be pretty consistent.
Thank you, Don. Is there any further council discussion?
Question.
District 4,
Yes.
District 5,
Yes.
District 6,
Yay.
at large. District 1, yes. District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
motion carries.
Item 4.2, ordinance number 20-670, amending the 2020-2021 operating budget of revenues and expenditures of the Recreation Department up to $88,160 for Arsenal Park equipment and a tennis restroom for St. Julian Sports Complex. Do we have a motion to adopt?
I move.
A second.
Don, would you like to comment on this item? It is the second vote. It was introduced at our last meeting.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Previously introduced at our last meeting, notice was provided through the advertiser. Tina tells me that notice and an affidavit was sent to City Hall. So we are in order tonight to actually adopt this. As I recall, we needed some more money for some equipment at Arsenal Park, and there was a restroom request for the other for St. Julian Park. And these are the numbers that they came up with, and I think we had discussion on that last time. So we are in a position to adopt this ordinance unless anybody has any further questions. I don't know if you have any requests for public comment.
No public comment.
Is there any council discussion?
Question.
District 5,
Yes.
District 6,
Yay.
at large, District 1, yes, District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4,
Yes.
motion carries.
Item 4.3, ordinance number 20-671, amending the 2020-2021 operating budget of revenues and expenditures for merit pay raises for the city employees, including the mayor and police chief, for a total of $46,994 effective January 1st, 2021. Do we have a motion to adopt?
Make a motion.
Second.
So I'd like to make a comment on this item. It was introduced at the last meeting, and it's been 18 months since the city of Broussard gave a pay raise to any of its employees. During COVID, when we did our last budget, it was the council determined that we should wait 6 months to see how the economy looks, what our taxable revenue was. There was a lot of uncertainty, as there still is today. But you heard Burton report tonight where our revenues currently stand. I would like to commend the hard work of our police department, our fire department, our administrative department, our public works department for what they have done over the last 18 months. They have worked through 2 hurricanes. They have worked through COVID. There was no ability for our police department, our fire department, our public service department to shut down during COVID. We had to find a way to move through, operate, and supply essential services within the city during that time. The work that's done by those departments keeps our city running. And there is never a time for myself, and I'm sure for the council, where we ask them to do something that they do not accommodate us and try to do that. With all of that being said, I have been in discussions with the chief between last meeting and now, and we both agree that we would like to, the chief and myself, respectfully thank the council for the offer to include us in the pay raises. But what is most important to both of us is that our employees get it. So thank you, but we would like to be excluded from the pay raise on this agenda. Chief, would you like to add anything to that?
Mayor's 100% accurate. We met, we discussed, very much, as I always do, come to you and say that this is for our employees. Excuse me. And I did so during this, I guess, budget amendment prep for our staff to be included in the pay raises. I want to thank the mayor and council for allowing us to present that to the administration and to you, to allow our employees to receive that. And second, third, fourth, the mayor's motion or his comments as far as what it is concerning him and I. I'm here for my employees. Yes, the mayor and I both do work hard, and we very much do appreciate Councilman Gary bringing it up that last meeting, and for what you think that we do deserve. However, we're not here for us. We're here for our teams. And, you know, prior administrations didn't see a lot of support. Mel can probably back that, where the mayor didn't, the city employees didn't have a leader that was there saying that they deserve this. I'm just going to leave it at that. I appreciate everything that the city and the council, the mayor does for us as a spokesperson for the police department, and Mel shaking his head, yes, I think I can speak on behalf of the rest of the city employees as we thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And what's important is we make the most conservative decisions we can to keep our city moving forward. And, you know, thank you again. Thank you, Ray Gary, for bringing it up at the last meeting. We appreciate that, but we think this is the right decision for the uncertain times that we are in.
Well, listen, this is the first time we haven't given the mayor or the chief a raise when we've given all other employees a raise. This is the first time.
I like to see us
do respect all our employees, but also, as a councilman, it's not the employees that have to represent the people. And with these tough times, this is a hard decision for me because we've all gone through a lot of things, tough times, and at this time, I will not support this pay raise due to the fact that small businesses are having trouble making payroll. I have people that I personally know that are not working, are laid off. And we're gonna sit here, we're doing great, yes, but we don't know what the tomorrow brings. So at this time, I will not support the pay raise that y'all all do deserve. But like I said, I support I represent the people of Broussard and the taxpayers. And at this time, I will not do it. That's all I have to say. And I have a question I would have to answer.
If there's any other council discussion.
Well, from a parliamentary standpoint, yes, Mr. Bonet is correct on that. The introductory ordinance was amended at the last meeting, and we changed the number. I'm not even sure if Karen has that number for me tonight, but so there's a motion on the table to adopt this as a final ordinance. So we could either, after these comments have been made, I guess we could vote on it and it would die, and then we could have a substitute motion and deduct the amount. It would go back to, we would withdraw $4,800 of the amount, right? For a total of $46,994.
That's good. It's 48.
4,800 for a total. Okay. Reduce 46,000 by 4,800, right? So either the motion dies, vote on it. If it doesn't pass, you can have a substitute motion. Again, you can amend an ordinance all the way up until the time you adopt it. However, it's supposed to be in writing to make the amendment. And last time, Tina and her staff on the ball. By the next morning, we had the written amendment. We were fine with that. So we would have to do that again this year.
What is your recommendation specifically, Don?
I would say that we could vote on this as presented, because there's a motion and a second. If somebody calls for the question, if no one calls for the question, then I guess it would die. And then we could have a substitute motion for that same amount of money minus the $4,800. We need to put it in writing. Confident Tina will do that for us. But you can amend an ordinance all the way up to the time of adoption, but it has to be in writing. I didn't know we would go on this way with it. Otherwise, I would withdraw it.
I'm absolutely. I'm just trying to make sure that parliamentary procedure is respected here. So, no motion, no call for the question allows this first item to die. Then there could be a motion for. Then there could be a motion for the amended number. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. So the total will be $42,194 effective January 1, 2021. That's what came before us at the previous meeting.
Which would be what you just mentioned would be the amended ordinance.
Correct.
Okay, so the first ordinance, if dies, we can go to a second, the amended
If
ordinance.
there's no call for the question.
Correct.
Or there can be a call for the question.
And it can be voted
Vote
down,
on it, it can be defeated.
which allows us to amend the ordinance after. Is there a call for the question? No question has been called.
So now we need a motion from someone to amend ordinance 20-671 to amend the 2020
2021 operating budget of revenues and expenditures for merit pay raises for city employees for a total of $42,194 effective January 1 of 2021.
I'll make that motion just like you said.
Is there any public comment, any part of it?
No public comment. Question. District 6,
Yay.
at large?
Nay.
District 1? Yes. District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Before we get to the adjournment of the meeting, Don, I'd like to make a comment that tonight is the last meeting that you will be the city attorney, officially the city attorney for the city of Broussard, which has spanned a career with us of 38 years. Congratulations and thank you for the service that you have given our city. You will be missed and we wish you the best of luck in your role as DA.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed working with everyone here, previous council members. Tina, it's been my pleasure to work with you and the staff. Anyway, thank you so much for giving me that opportunity to do so. And I'll be back. I'm coming back for some meetings. Tina said it was okay.
It is okay. We're happy to have you anytime and
Thank you for that.
you're welcome. And we look very forward to working with Mr. Gerald Deloney in the future. Welcome, Gerald.
Before we, you got something else? I'd like the school engineer, just for a little while, just for the public record. What, yeah, you the engineer. Today anyhow. What's the deal with the intersection
Bernard Road?
and Main?
Bernard Road, I'm gonna do this kind of compressed. But Main Street is right there in front of City Hall is a city street until it gets in the middle of the intersection of Bernard and 182. Then it becomes a state street. We have to get a state permit. We have been working on that. We met with the state about 6 months, maybe more than that ago, and told them we wanted to right-size the remainder of it and had to take the whole intersection. And at the time, and the mayor was in the meeting, they told us that that was, oh, great, that's wonderful. That has changed. I don't know why. So we're working on we have to get a permit from them. Even though the three of the 4 roads going into the intersection are City of Broussard streets, that intersection will be under DOTD jurisdiction. Right now, the only option I have is to get a project permit for them, and we have been working on that. That's been submitted for several months now. As of yesterday, I wrote a letter for the mayor to sign, to send to them, and I think the mayor had a conversation with the assistant district administrator, and I believe what he told you, correct me if I'm wrong, was that it was forthcoming. It had a couple minor issues. We don't know, this was today. So tomorrow we're supposed to get a call from them on the minor issues, which I'm hoping are minor. Besides all of that, we have decided, and I don't know if you noticed, but they started clearing there. We are moving forward on 3 of those 4 roads are ours. We told the contractor to go to work. It's time to go to work. We've had a lot of issues with getting utilities out of the way. It's just been a little mini nightmare, but I think we're starting to make traction. I don't know if you remember, we had a tree resting on a Cox communication line since the hurricane. The mayor finally had to call. We couldn't get him to do anything. Mel couldn't get him to do anything. The mayor finally called and they removed the tree. So it's just been kind of one headache after another. I want to finish this thing. I'm tired of looking at it. Originally, that intersection was not in my project. It was in the project for Bernard Road from 182 to 90. Okay, what happened is we got there first and we couldn't wait. So we changed gears. The original plan, and this goes back to the last term, the original plan on Main Street was to 3-lane the whole thing. That was gonna be a much bigger intersection. Well, when we went through the charrette and the public hearings and all that, that concept changed. And that's kind of some of this mixed in. That intersection was gonna be gigantic. We tightened everything up. It's less expensive to build, but it did it's thrown in some complications that we didn't feel we were gonna have because 6-7 months ago, we were told, oh yeah, you can have the intersection. Now that's changing. And I don't know why, but all I can tell you is this: the best thing we can do right now today is push forward, get our permit, and build the road. And that's what.
And I did have a positive conversation today with DOTD and expressed the need for urgency here. We would like to move forward our project. We have a contractor that's trying to do some things that technically, we need the permit approval. I'm confident that they are taking a hard look at this and trying to move it forward after speaking with them today and after Walter was able to, send it in a letter yesterday and I was able to follow up.
But this is something we've literally been working on for months, trying to straighten out between the highway department and all the utilities. And look, I'm not making excuses. It's just, this is what we do. And let me tell you, when we get into this part of Main Street, it's gonna be like that. It's just, some projects are like that, and it's just the way it is. So we're gonna slug it out until we get it finished. And I don't want y'all to misunderstand anything I'm saying. We have an excellent relationship with DOTD, but that's a big bureaucracy. So it is what it is.
I've got another question. Did we get some bids together for part 1 of Main Street down there from Bernard Road to Clare?
We met with DDG this week. Again, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Division 1, which is civil engineering, drainage and sidewalk part of it, is due to advertise early January. They are ready to go. The Division 2 is going to be lighting, and they're still trying to figure out landscaping, lighting, trees, all that kind of stuff. But I think that part of it, which is kind of getting outside of my area, the mayor wants the council very involved in.
There's still some decisions to be made when it comes down to final dressing, street, some poles and whatnot. The council needs to be involved with that. So DDG is making preparations to have that happen. But as far as, a lot of the civil stuff, that's going to bid first, and this will be the part B of the project.
All of the non-sexy, non-interesting stuff is going to get done first, and then after that is going to be the part that actually makes it
Cosmetic.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. While you're at,
Okay.
when we're gonna have some drawings for Morgan Street drainage?
Where are we at on that, Dan? Okay, so we're still getting data and drafting it up. So it shouldn't be that much longer. We got to be getting close to finishing all that. Oh, okay. Yeah, some of the old stuff we got to it's detective work. And then again, I'm not making excuses, but I got my survey crew's out with COVID right now. So, but I think they'll be back in about a week and a half, but they're not hunting. I think they wish they were hunting, but they're not hunting. Anything? All right, thank you.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
At large? District one? Yes. District two?
Yes.
District three?
Yes.
District four?
Yes.
District five?
Yes.
District six?
Yay.
Motion carries.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming to the meeting.